Captain Lee Jun stood at the window of his ship, watching the beautiful world of Ketra getting bigger and bigger as they moved closer. The planet looked like a giant green and blue marble floating in space with white clouds dancing around it like soft cotton. His heart felt warm every time he saw this world because it meant he was visiting his friends. The ship called Harmony was not built for fighting. It was made for talking and making peace with other beings from different worlds. Lee Jun had been the captain of this ship for 3 years now, and every trip to Ketra made him happy. The beings who lived on this planet were called Ketrans, and they were very different from humans, but also very kind. Ambassador Park Minji walked up to stand next to the captain. She held a datapad in her hands that showed all the trade agreements between Earth and Ketra for 5 long years. These two very different species had been working together in secret. The Ketrans were plant-like beings who could grow things in ways humans never imagined, while humans had music and art that made the Ketrans very excited. Park Minji remembered her first meeting with a Ketran 5 years ago. She had been scared because the being looked so strange. It was tall like a tree with green skin that had patterns like bark. Its arms were long and thin like branches, and when it moved it swayed gently like grass in the wind. But when it spoke, its voice was soft and musical like wind chimes. The Ketrans had taught humans how to grow food using very little water and space. They showed Earth scientists how to make plants grow faster and stronger than ever before. Human farmers could now feed twice as many people using half the land they used before. This was very important because Earth had so many people and not enough food for everyone. In return, humans had shared their music with the Ketrans. The plant beings had never heard anything like human songs before. When Park Minji first played Mozart for Elder Bloom Singer, the old Ketran had started to glow with different colors and had cried tears that looked like tree sap. The Ketran said it was the most beautiful thing he had ever experienced. Commander Kim Tae-ho was down in the cargo area, checking the gifts they were bringing to their friends. This time they had new musical instruments from Earth, including guitars, pianos, and flutes. The Ketrans loved to learn how to make music, even though their plant-like fingers made it hard to play human instruments. They had created their own versions that they could play by growing special parts on their bodies. Kim Tae-ho smiled as he remembered his last visit to Ketra. He had stayed for 2 months living in the Ketran city, which was unlike anything humans had ever built. The buildings were actually giant living trees that had been grown and shaped over hundreds of years. The walls were alive and could change color based on the mood of the people inside. The Ketran city was lit by flowers that glowed with soft light instead of electric bulbs. The streets were made of thick grass that felt soft under your feet. Rivers of clean water ran through the city and fish swam in them, while birds from many different worlds sang in the tree branches above. Walking through this city felt like being in a magical forest. Dar Choi Su Jin, the ship's scientist, was excited to see her Ketran friends again. She had learned so much from them about how plants and animals could work together. The Ketrans could talk to plants and make them grow in any shape they wanted. They could also heal very quickly when they got hurt by growing new parts of their bodies. The Ketrans had warned Earth about something scary called the Galactic Council. Most humans thought the Council was a group of friendly aliens who helped different worlds work together, but the Ketrans knew the truth. The Council was not nice at all. They thought some species were better than others, and they hurt or killed the ones they thought were not good enough. Elder Bloom Singer had told Dr. Choi that the Council ranked every species like students in a school. The ones at the top got everything they wanted, while the ones at the bottom were treated very badly. Some species had disappeared completely after the Council decided they were not worth keeping alive. This scared the Ketrans because they knew humans would be ranked very low. The Ketrans had secretly given Earth technology to help protect themselves. They shared cloaking devices that could make ships invisible and shield generators that could stop powerful weapons. They also taught humans how to make their computers work with living plants, which made them much smarter and harder to hack. Captain Lee Jun looked at his watch and saw they would reach the Ketran space station in 1 hour. He was excited to see his friend, Station Keeper Green Branch, who always had funny stories to tell. The station was built inside a giant asteroid, but the Ketrans had filled it with plants and made it feel like a garden in space. The crew of the Harmony got ready for docking. Everyone put on their best uniforms because meeting the Ketrans was always a special event. The plant beings cared a lot about showing respect, and humans had learned to do the same. Park Minji checked her speech one more time. She was going to thank the Ketrans for their friendship and promised that Earth would always remember their kindness. As the ship got closer to the station, they could see Ketran bioships moving around like living creatures. These ships were actually grown, not built, and they could heal themselves if they got damaged. The bioships moved in graceful patterns like fish swimming through water, and they glowed with soft colors that showed the emotions of their crews. Kim Tae-ho watched the bioships with wonder. Even after all these years, he still could not believe how beautiful Ketran technology was. Everything they made was alive and could think for itself. Human machines were cold and hard, but Ketran creations were warm and soft like living friends. The Harmony slowly moved into the docking bay of the space station. Ketran workers, who looked like walking trees, waved at them. With their branch-like arms, the air in the station smelled like flowers and fresh rain, which always made humans feel happy and peaceful. Park Minji gathered her team and prepared to leave the ship. She carried gifts of music and art from Earth, while her crew carried scientific equipment that the Ketrans wanted to study. This meeting was supposed to be the start of an even closer friendship between their two species. None of them knew that hidden in the darkness of Space Council warships were already moving toward them. The peaceful meeting they were looking forward to would soon become a nightmare that would change everything. The friendship between humans and Ketrans was about to be tested in the worst possible way. Captain Lee Jun smiled as he prepared to greet his alien friends. He had no idea this would be the last time he would see them alive. The first explosion shook the entire space station like an earthquake. Ambassador Park Minji was sitting with Elder Bloom Singer in his beautiful garden chamber drinking tea made from glowing flowers when the walls started to shake. The old Ketrans bark-like skin turned pale, and his branch arms trembled as cups fell to the floor and broke into pieces. Through the transparent walls of the station, they could see something terrible happening in space. Giant dark ships were appearing out of nowhere. Like monsters coming out of a nightmare, these ships were huge and black with sharp edges that looked like knives. Their weapons were already glowing with deadly light, ready to fire again. Captain Lee Jun ran as fast as he could to the bridge of his ship Harmony. The hallways were filled with panicking people, both human and Ketran, running in all directions. Some were crying, some were screaming, and some just stood frozen with fear. The emergency lights were flashing red and alarms were making loud, scary sounds. When Lee Jun reached the bridge, he saw his crew looking at their screens with horror on their faces. The attacking ships belonged to the Galactic Council, but these were not the peaceful diplomatic vessels that Earth had seen. Before, these were warships built for destruction, and they were firing on everything that moved. Commander Kim Tae-ho was at the weapons station, but the Harmony was not a ship. It had only small defensive guns that could barely scratch the paint on a Council warship. He watched helplessly as the massive enemy vessels fired their plasma cannons, turning Ketran bioships into burning wreckage that fell toward the planet below. The Ketran bioships were trying to fight back, but they were ships of peace, not war. Their living hulls could heal from small damage, but the Council weapons were too powerful. The bioships screamed as they died, making sounds like wounded animals that broke the hearts of everyone who heard them. Dr. Choi Soo Jin was in the medical bay trying to help wounded Ketrans who had been brought from damaged ships. The plant beings were hurt in ways she had never seen before. Their green skin was turning black, and they were making terrible crying sounds that sounded like wind through dead trees. The injured Ketrans told her that the Council ships had used special chemical weapons designed to kill their kind. These weapons not only hurt them, but stopped their natural healing powers from working. Dr. Choi watched in horror as Ketrans who should have been able to grow new limbs just withered away like dying plants. Station keeper Green Branch came running into the medical bay carrying a small Ketran child. The little one looked like a tiny tree with bright green leaves, but now those leaves were turning brown and falling off. Green Branch was crying tears that looked like tree sap as he begged Dr. Choi to save the child. The attack was not random or accidental. The Council ships knew exactly where to hit to cause the most damage. They targeted the nurseries where Ketran children were growing. They destroyed the healing centers where the old and sick were cared for. They even fired on the refugee ships that were trying to escape with Famla's commander. Kim Tae-ho managed to record everything on his personal device, even though it made him sick to watch. Through his camera, he captured images of Ketran families being torn apart by plasma fire. Children who had sung beautiful songs for human visitors were now crying in terror as their world burned around them. The Council ground forces were even worse than the ships. Soldiers in dark armor landed on the station and began hunting down every Ketran they could find. They had weapons that sprayed poisonous gas specifically made to kill plant-based life forms. The gas turned the air green and deadly, making the Ketrans choke and die. Dr. Choi tried everything she could think of to help the dying Ketrans. She used every medicine and treatment Earth had taught her, but nothing worked against the Council's biological weapons. The chemical weapons had been designed by scientists who studied Ketran biology for the specific purpose of genocide. Elder Bloom Singer was brought to the medical Bay, badly hurt from the poison gas, his ancient bark skin was cracking and falling off like old paint. He grabbed Dr. Troy's hand with his weakening grip and whispered in a voice like rustling leaves, "Tell your people the council fears what humans might become." The old Ketran continued to speak even as his life faded away. "They will come for you next because they saw how we work together. They hate friendship between different species because it makes us stronger than they are. Remember what we taught you about growing strong from helping each other." Ambassador Park Minji found Captain Lee Jun in the chaos of the evacuation. She was carrying a data crystal that Elder Bloom Singer had given her before he died. The crystal contained all the evidence of the Council's crimes and proof that this was planned genocide, not a random attack. The few humans who could be found were being hunted by Council soldiers, but the dying Ketrans used their last strength to help their friends escape. Station Keeper Green Branch sacrificed himself to seal a corridor so the humans could reach their ship. He smiled, even as the poison gas killed him, telling them to remember the good times they had shared. Kim Tae-ho had to drag Dr. Choi away from the medical bay. She did not want to leave the wounded Ketrans behind, but there was nothing more she could do. The chemical weapons were spreading through the station's air system, and soon every plant-based life form would be dead. The escape was a nightmare of running through corridors filled with green poison gas and the screams of dying Ketrans. The Council soldiers were everywhere, hunting down survivors with cold efficiency. They showed no mercy to children or elderly beings, treating the massacre like it was just another job. Captain Lee Jun got his crew to the Harmony just as the station's main power failed. The bioships that had welcomed them with joy just hours before were now floating dead in space, their living hulls dark and lifeless. The beautiful garden station was becoming a tomb filled with the bodies of their friends. As the Harmony pulled away from the dying station, Ambassador Park Minji looked back at what had been a place of peace and friendship. Now it was burning wreckage drifting in space while Council ships continued to fire on anything that moved. She held the data crystal tight in her hand, knowing it contained the only proof of what really happened. The journey back to Earth felt like a funeral. The few human survivors sat in shocked silence, trying to understand how such evil could exist in the galaxy. They had lost friends who had treated them like family and seen an entire peaceful civilization murdered for the crime of friendship. Dr. Troy could not stop crying as she thought about the Ketran children who would never grow up to sing their beautiful songs. The little ones had called her Aunt Su Jin and had made her flower crowns with their tiny branch fingers. Now they were all dead, killed by beings who saw them as nothing more than weeds to be destroyed. Kim Tae-ho stared at the recordings he had made, knowing that Earth needed to see the truth about what the Galactic Council really was. The images were horrible, but they proved that the Council was not a peaceful organization, but a group of monsters who killed anyone who did not obey them. As the Harmony limped toward Earth, carrying its cargo of grief and rage, the survivors made a promise to their dead friends. The Ketrans would not be forgotten, and their sacrifice would not be meaningless. Humanity would make sure the galaxy knew the truth about the Council's crimes. President Yang Min-ho stood in front of the biggest gathering of world leaders Earth had ever seen. The United Nations Emergency Assembly Hall was packed with representatives from every country on the planet. Everyone had come to see the terrible footage that Captain Lee Jun and his crew had brought back from the Ketran massacre. The huge screens around the hall showed images that made grown men cry and strong women cover their faces in horror. They saw Ketran children burning in plasma fire. They saw the beautiful bioships dying like wounded animals. They saw poison gas turning peaceful plant beings into withered corpses. The silence in the hall was complete except for the sound of people crying. President Yang's voice was steady, but his hands shook as he spoke to the assembly. "These were our friends," he said, pointing at the screen where Elder Bloom Singer was shown teaching human children how to make flowers grow. "These beings never hurt anyone. They shared their knowledge freely. They treated us as equals. They are dead now because they dared to be our allies." Within 6 hours of seeing the footage, every nation on Earth had signed the Unity Accord. Countries that had been enemies for centuries put aside their hatred to face this common threat. Russia and America worked together. China and India shared resources. Africa and Europe opened their borders. The Ketran genocide had done something no human leader had ever managed to accomplish. Admiral Song Hai-jin was chosen to lead Earth's first official mission to the Galactic Council. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but she had fought in 3 wars and never lost a battle. The president chose her because she could be diplomatic when needed, but also because she understood the cost of violence. The fleet that left Earth was the most beautiful collection of ships humanity had ever built. They were painted white with blue and green stripes to represent Earth's colors. Each ship carried the names of Ketran victims written in golden letters along their hulls. The flagship was named Elder's Memory in honor of Bloom Singer, who had died trying to warn Humanity Ambassador. Shin Dong-wook had spent 3 months preparing for this mission. He had studied every law and treaty the Galactic Council had ever written. He memorized their history, their customs, their language, and their legal procedures. He believed that surely, when faced with clear evidence of genocide, even the Council would have to give justice. The journey to the Council headquarters took 2 weeks of traveling through hyperspace. The massive station orbited a neutron star and looked like a giant metal flower with thousands of petals. Each petal was home to a different species, and the center was where the most powerful beings lived. The whole structure was designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. When Admiral Song's fleet arrived, they were met by Council escort ships that looked like silver arrows. These ships were sleek and fast with weapons that could destroy a planet if needed. The escort pilots did not speak to the humans but simply led them to a docking bay in one of the outer petals far from the center of power. The Council chambers were a marvel that took Ambassador Shin's breath away. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to reach up forever. Representatives from hundreds of different species sat in floating chairs arranged in complex patterns based on their rank and importance. The air itself seemed to hum with power and authority. At the center of it all was the hegemon, a being of pure energy that looked like a small star contained in a crystal sphere. It spoke through translators that turned its thoughts into sounds that different species could understand. Its voice sounded like music, but cold music without any warmth or emotion. Ambassador Shin walked to the speaking platform in the center of the chamber. He felt very small, surrounded by so many alien beings, some of whom were larger than Earth buildings. He placed his evidence crystal into the chamber's system and began to present his case with all the passion and skill he possessed. The holographic displays showed the massacre in terrible detail. Ketran families running from plasma fire, children dying from poison gas, the systematic destruction of hospitals and schools, the cold efficiency of soldiers who killed without mercy. Shin spoke for 2 hours, presenting evidence that no honest court could ignore. When he finished speaking, the chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the hegemon's crystal began to glow brighter, and its musical voice filled the room. The translation came through clearly and hit the human delegation like a physical blow. The Ketrans were eliminated for unauthorized technology sharing and cultural contamination. Ambassador Shin felt his heart stop as the hegemon continued speaking. The plant beings had violated Council law by forming an alliance with a lower species without permission. Their destruction was not only legal but necessary to maintain galactic order. The Council had acted within its rights to prevent the spread of dangerous ideas, but the worst was yet to come. The hegemon announced that Earth itself was now under investigation for the same crimes. The evidence clearly showed that humans had accepted Ketran technology and formed emotional bonds with an alien species without Council approval. This could not be allowed to continue. Admiral Song Hai-jin stood up from her seat in the viewing area. She had heard enough, and she could see that diplomacy was not going to work. The Council was not interested in justice or truth. They only cared about power and control. They saw the massacre of innocents as nothing more than pest control. The Council's final statement was delivered with the same cold musical tone. Earth had 72 hours to surrender all Ketran technologies, submit to permanent Council oversight, and accept tributary status as a lower species. The alternative was the same fate that had befallen their plant friends: complete annihilation. Ambassador Shin tried to speak again, tried to appeal to whatever conscience these beings might have, but the session was declared over. The human delegation was escorted from the chambers by armed guards who made it clear that their diplomatic immunity was a temporary courtesy that could be revoked at any moment. The journey back to their ships felt like a walk to their own execution. Admiral Song could see Council warships positioning themselves around the station. Their escort had become a guard detail, and the pretty silver ships now had their weapons powered and ready. The message was clear: obey or Didier Lee Su. Jin, who had come as a scientific advisor, spent the return journey studying the data crystal that Elder Bloom Singer had given them. Hidden in the evidence of the massacre were technical specifications for advanced weapons and shield systems. The dying Ketrans had given humanity the tools they would need to survive. As the fleet left the Council station, Admiral Song looked back at the massive structure that represented order and law in the galaxy. She now knew it was really a symbol of oppression and murder. The beings inside saw other species as nothing more than resources to be used or problems to be solved. Return journey to Earth was filled with planning and preparation. Admiral Song and Ambassador Shin worked with their staff to Draft Earth's response to the Council ultimatum. They knew what the answer would be, but they also knew it meant war with an enemy that had destroyed civilizations for thousands of years. General Park Byung-ho was waiting when the diplomatic fleet returned to Earth. He had used the time to mobilize every military resource. The planet had weapons factories were working day and night. Shipyards were building vessels using Ketran biotechnology that the Council did not know existed. The President called another emergency session, and this time every human on Earth watched as Ambassador Shin delivered his report. The footage from the Council chambers was even more chilling than the massacre itself. These beings felt no guilt or shame about genocide. They saw it as routine maintenance. When the vote was called, the result was unanimous. Earth would not surrender. Earth would not bow. Earth would not forget the friends who had died trying to warn them. The Ketrans had given humanity the knowledge to fight back, and that gift would not be wasted on submission to murderers. The final message Earth sent to the Galactic Council was broadcast across the entire galaxy. President Yang Min-ho appeared on every screen, speaking in a calm voice that carried the weight of an entire species behind it. "You murdered our friends for treating us as equals," he said. "You threatened us for refusing to kneel." His next words would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. Humanity remembers the Ketrans, and we will have justice for their deaths. Come and take us if you can. The age of Earth's innocence was over. The age of Earth's fury was just beginning. The journey back to Earth felt like traveling through a nightmare. Admiral Song Hai-jin stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as Council warships followed them like hungry wolves. The sleek silver vessels that had escorted them to the station were now openly threatening, making it clear that the humans were no longer guests but potential targets. Ambassador Shin Dong-wook sat in his quarters, staring at the wall and replaying the Council session over and over in his mind. He had believed that surely when faced with evidence of genocide, even these alien beings would show some mercy or justice. Instead, they had celebrated the murder of innocents and threatened to do the same to Earth. The Council ships were not even trying to hide their hostile intentions anymore. Their weapons were powered and ready, their shields were up, and their formation was designed for a quick strike. If the humans tried to run or fight, the message was crystal clear: submit or be destroyed. Just like the Ketrans. Lee Soo-jin worked frantically in her laboratory, studying the data crystal that Elder Bloom Singer had given them before he died. The Ketran leader had hidden more than just evidence of the massacre in that crystal. He had included technical specifications for weapons and defenses that could hurt Council ships. The biotechnology was amazing beyond anything human science had imagined. Weapons that could adapt and evolve during battle, shield systems that could heal themselves when damaged, cloaking devices that made ships invisible to even the most advanced sensors. The Ketrans had known this day would come and had prepared Earth for war. Each page of technical data was written with love and hope. The dying Ketrans had spent their last moments not on revenge or hatred, but on giving their human friends the tools to survive. They had included personal messages too, telling humanity to stay strong and remember that friendship was worth fighting for. General Park Byung-ho was waiting at Earth's main spaceport when the diplomatic fleet returned. His face was grim and his uniform was wrinkled from working day and night to prepare for the war everyone knew was coming. Behind him stood representatives from every military force on Earth, all united for the first time in human history. The Council ultimatum was exactly what everyone had expected. Earth had 72 hours to surrender all Ketran technologies, submit to permanent oversight, and accept status as a slave species. The alternative was complete destruction. Admiral Song delivered the message to a room full of generals who listened in stone-cold silence. President Yang Min-ho called an emergency meeting of all world leaders within 6 hours of the fleet's return. The usual arguing and political games were forgotten. Everyone understood that this was not about nations or borders anymore. This was about the survival of the human species itself. The vote was quick and unanimous. Earth would not surrender. The Ketrans had died for the crime of friendship, and humanity would not dishonor their sacrifice by bowing to their murderers. Every country pledged its full military might to the defense of their world and the memory of their fallen allies. Commander Yoon Ji-hai had been working in secret for months, preparing for this exact moment. Using Ketran biotechnology and human engineering skills, she had overseen the construction of a hidden fleet that the Council knew nothing about. These ships were built in asteroid mines and underwater facilities far from prying alien eyes. The new warships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They combined human innovation with Ketran biological systems to create vessels that were part machine and part living creature. The hulls could heal damage, the computers could think and adapt, and the weapons could evolve to meet any threat. Captain Jang Min-seok was one of the first pilots trained to fly these bioships. He described the experience as like having a conversation with an intelligent animal. The ship could sense his emotions and respond to his thoughts. The interface was not cold metal and plastic, but warm organic material that pulsed with life. The bioships could do things that normal spacecraft could never manage. They could change shape during combat, stretching and bending to avoid enemy fire. They could split into smaller vessels when needed or combine with other ships to form larger, more powerful configurations. They were alive in every sense of the word. Dr. Kim Hae-won led the team developing biological weapons that could turn the Council's own technology against them. Using Ketra knowledge of how different life forms worked, she created computer viruses that treated enemy systems like living organisms. The viruses could spread, evolve, and adapt just like real diseases. The weapons were designed to be specifically effective against Council technology. Their massive ships relied on complex computer networks to function properly. The bioviruses could infect these networks and cause the ships to malfunction or even turn their weapons on each other. Commander Oh Se-hun commanded the stealth division, where ships had been equipped with advanced cloaking technology improved by human engineers. The Ketran invisibility systems had been good, but humans had made them even better, creating vessels that existed in a quantum state between visible and invisible. These ghost ships could appear just long enough to fire their weapons, then fade back into nothingness before the enemy could target them. They moved like spirits through space, striking without warning and disappearing. Before retaliation was possible, the Council had never faced an enemy they could not see. As the 72-hour deadline approached, Earth transformed into a fortress. Orbital defense platforms rose from hidden locations on the moon. Weapon satellites moved into position around the planet. Millions of human soldiers prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of their species. The final hours before the deadline were spent in preparation and remembrance. Memorial services were held for the Ketrans who had died trying to protect humanity. Children learned songs that Elder Bloom Singer had taught their parents. Flowers were planted in gardens across Earth to honor their plant friends. President Yang Min-ho addressed the entire human race in a broadcast that reached every corner of the planet. He spoke calmly, but his words carried the weight of righteous anger. The Council thinks we are weak because we value friendship over conquest, he said. They think we are cowards because we prefer peace to war. His voice grew stronger as he continued. They murdered our friends for the crime of treating us as equals. They threaten us with extinction for refusing to bow to them. But they have made a terrible mistake. They have awakened something in humanity that they do not understand. The president's final words would be remembered for generations. The Ketrans taught us that life is precious and friendship is sacred. We will honor their memory by showing the galaxy that some things are worth fighting for. Come, Council, come and learn what happens when you threaten Earth's family. As the deadline passed and Council warships began moving toward Earth, the hidden human fleet powered up their bioengines. The ships hummed with life as their organic computers came online. Weapons that had never been tested in combat began to glow with deadly energy. Admiral Song Hai-jin took command of the defense fleet from her new flagship, a bioship named Ketran's Revenge. The vessel was beautiful and terrible at the same time, with hull plates that looked like bark and weapon ports that resembled flower buds. The ship pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that showed its readiness for battle. The time for diplomacy was over. The time for submission had never existed. The Council had chosen to solve their fear of human friendship with genocide and threats. Now they would learn that some species could not be intimidated into slavery. The warships were powering up, and their message would be written in fire. Captain Lee Jun, who had survived the massacre at the Ketran station, took his place at the weapons console of a biofighter. His ship was small but deadly, designed for speed and precision strikes. He thought of Elder Bloom Singer and all the Ketran children who would never grow up as he prepared to fight. The first Council fleet appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, their dark ships bristling with weapons designed to destroy planets. They expected to find a primitive world defended by crude rockets and simple lasers. Instead, they found something that would change the galaxy forever. The first Council fleet dropped out of hyperspace, expecting to find Earth defended by primitive rockets and simple energy weapons. Instead, they found themselves facing something that defied everything they thought they knew about warfare. The human solar system had been transformed into a fortress unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Song Hai-jin stood on the bridge of her flagship, Ketran's Revenge, watching as the enemy ships tried to understand what they were seeing. The bio ship hummed around her, its living walls pulsing with patterns of light that showed its eagerness for battle. The vessel was both beautiful and terrible, like a flower made of weapons and armor. The Council fleet commander sent the standard surrender demand expecting the humans to immediately give up when faced with such overwhelming firepower. Instead, Admiral Song's response was broadcast across all frequencies, so every ship in both fleets could hear, "We remember the Ketrans, and today we will have justice for their deaths." Captain Jang Min-seok launched his biofighter from the carrier's living hangar bay. The small craft felt warm and alive around him, responding to his thoughts and emotions faster than any mechanical interface could. The fighter's hull shifted and adapted as it flew, changing shape to match his tactical needs. The first engagement began when the Council ships opened fire, expecting their plasma cannons to cut through human defenses like paper. Instead, their beams struck adaptive shields that absorbed the energy and converted it into power for Earth's weapons. The human bioships did not just survive the attack, they grew stronger from it. Commander Kim Tae-ho led a squadron of medium fighters in a coordinated strike against a Council destroyer. The human ships moved like a school of fish, each pilot knowing exactly where the others were without needing radio communication. The bio-neural interfaces let them share thoughts and coordinate in ways the enemy could not predict. The Council pilots had trained for centuries to fight against conventional spacecraft. They knew how to target engines, weapon systems, and command centers, but the human bioships had no such vulnerable points. When damaged, they simply grew new parts and continued fighting. Their organic systems could adapt and evolve during combat. Dr. Kim Hae-won's biological weapons proved devastatingly effective against Council technology. The computer viruses she had created spread through enemy networks like a plague, turning the aliens' own systems against them. Council ships found their weapons firing at their own allies, while their navigation systems led them into asteroid fields. Commander Sehun's stealth cruisers appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the void. The quantum cloaking systems developed from Ketran technology made the human ships exist in multiple states at once. They could be in several places, simultaneously striking from impossible angles before fading back into nothingness. The Council fleet tried to adapt to these new tactics, but they were fighting an enemy that changed faster than they could respond. Human bioships that started the battle as destroyers could split into multiple frigates, or combine with others to form massive dreadnoughts. The enemy never knew what they were facing. Captain Lee Jun piloted his fighter through the chaos of the battle, remembering the Ketran children, who had sung him lullabies during his visits to their world. Every shot he fired was for them. Every enemy he destroyed was justice for their murders. His bioship responded to his emotions, becoming more deadly as his anger grew. The battle raged across the solar system from Mercury to Pluto. Human defenders used the planets themselves as weapons, redirecting asteroids and comets into enemy formations. The Council had expected a quick victory against a primitive species. Instead, they found themselves in the fight of their lives. Admiral Song watched as her fleet's living ships evolved during the combat, learning from each enemy attack and developing new defenses and weapons. The bioships were not just machines of war, they were warriors in their own right, fighting with the intelligence and adaptability that only living beings possess. The Council's superior numbers began to mean less and less as human tactics proved devastatingly effective. Small biofighters swarmed around massive enemy dreadnoughts like angry wasps, their adaptive weapons finding weak points that should not have existed. The aliens' advanced shields were useless against weapons that changed their frequency with every shot. General Park Byung-ho coordinated the overall defense from Earth's command center, watching as his forces turned the Council's strength against them. The enemy's rigid military doctrine and predictable tactics became liabilities when facing an opponent that refused to follow conventional rules of warfare. The human bioships sang as they fought, their living hulls producing harmonic frequencies that coordinated their attacks. The songs were based on Ketran music transformed into something new and terrible. The sound itself became a weapon, disrupting enemy communications and causing their computer systems to malfunction. As the battle continued, Council reinforcements arrived, expecting to find their advanced fleet finishing off the last human resistance. Instead, they discovered burning wreckage drifting in space and human ships hunting down survivors like predators. The impossible had happened. Earth was winning. Captain Jang Min-seok's fighter had evolved during the battle, growing additional weapon pods and stronger armor. His ship was now twice its original size and 3 times as deadly. The bio-neural interface had learned from his fighting style and begun anticipating his moves, making him faster and more accurate than any pilot should. Beatty Council commanders began to panic as they realized their technology advantage meant nothing against an enemy that could adapt faster than they could think. Human bioships that they destroyed would regenerate and return to battle stronger than before. It was like fighting an enemy that could not truly die. Commander Sehun led his ghost fleet in a strike against the Council command ship. The massive vessel was protected by layers of shields and armor that should have been impenetrable, but the stealth cruisers phased through the defenses like they did not exist, appearing inside the enemy ship's hull before unleashing their weapons dar. Kim Hae-won's viruses had spread throughout the Council fleet, turning their own ships into allies of humanity. Enemy vessels began firing on each other as their computer systems fell under human control. The aliens found themselves fighting not just Earth's fleet but their own technology as well. The final blow came when Admiral Song's flagship engaged the Council fleet's dreadnought in single combat. The massive enemy vessel was 10 times larger than Ketron's Revenge, but size meant nothing when facing a living ship that could think and adapt. The bioship flowed around the enemy's weapons like liquid death. The human flagship's hull opened like a flower, revealing weapons that had never existed before the battle began. The bioship had grown them in response to the enemy's defenses, creating exactly what was needed to penetrate. The dreadnought's armor, the Council ship, died screaming as organic weapons ate through its hull. When the battle finally ended, the space around Earth was filled with the wreckage of Council ships. Human bio-vessels moved through the debris singing victory songs in frequencies learned from their Ketron teachers. The impossible had happened. A primitive species had defeated the galaxy's greatest military power. The few surviving Council ships fled in terror, carrying word of humanity's victory back to their masters. News of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Oppressed species began to hope, while Council loyalists began to fear. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone knew it. Admiral Song stood on her bridge, looking out at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable fleet. Around her, the bioship pulsed with satisfaction, its living systems already beginning to heal from the battle damage. They had honored their fallen friends and proven that some things were worth fighting. Fourth victory celebration was brief because everyone knew this was only the beginning. The Council would send more fleets, larger armies, and deadlier weapons. But humanity had proven something important to the galaxy. They had shown that the Council could be defeated, and that courage was more powerful than fear. Captain Lee Jun docked his fighter in the living hangar bay and climbed out to find his ship had grown new sections during the battle. The bio-vessel had learned and adapted, becoming something new and more powerful. He touched the warm organic hull and whispered, "Thank you to the Ketron friends who had made this victory possible." Message had been sent across the galaxy in the language that all tyrants understood. The warships had spoken, and their words were written in fire and victory. Earth had announced its arrival on the galactic stage, and nothing would ever be the same again. 1 year after the great battle that changed everything, Ambassador Park Minji stood in what used to be the Galactic Council headquarters. The massive station that had once been a symbol of oppression and fear was now the heart of something completely different. The Freedom Alliance had taken over, and the building rang with voices speaking of hope. Instead of submission, the crystalline translators that had once carried the hegemon's cold commands now broadcast calls for liberation across the galaxy. Species that had been slaves for centuries were declaring their independence and asking Earth for help. The impossible dream of freedom was becoming reality, one world at a time. Admiral Song Haijin sat in her new office reading reports from across known space. Every day brought news of former Council colonies breaking free from their oppressors. Human bioships, crewed by teams of different species, were helping to protect newly independent worlds from Council loyalist attacks. The bio technology that the Ketrons had shared with humanity was now spreading to their allies. Each species adapted it in their own way, creating fleets unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships that could think and grow and heal themselves were becoming the standard for free peoples everywhere. Captain Jang Min Seok commanded a mixed crew aboard his evolved bioship. The vessel had grown during the year, becoming something that was part human engineering, part Ketron biology, and part contributions from a dozen other species. His weapons officer was a crystal being from Rigel. His navigator was a gas creature from the Vega system. The ship itself had become almost unrecognizable from its original form. The bio-neural networks had learned from every crew member, creating new interfaces that worked with different types of minds. The hull had adapted to provide the right atmosphere for each species, while the weapons had evolved to counter every known Council tactic. Dr. Choi Soo-jin now worked in the largest medical facility the galaxy had ever seen, using Ketron healing technology enhanced by human innovation. She could treat injuries and diseases from hundreds of different species. The medical bay was a living organism that could adapt its treatments to help any form of life. She often thought about the Ketron children who had died in the massacre and how proud they would be To see their healing knowledge being used to save lives across the galaxy, every patient she helped was a small victory against the hatred that had killed her plant friend's president. Yang Minho addressed the first Galactic Freedom Assembly held in orbit around what had once been the Ketra system. A memorial garden now grew there with plants from 100 different worlds, creating a living tribute to the species whose sacrifice had sparked the revolution. The memorial was beautiful beyond words. Trees from Earth grew next to crystal formations from silicon-based worlds, while energy beings from gas giants provided light for photosynthetic species. The garden was alive with the sounds and colors of 1,000 different forms of life, all living together in harmony. Representatives from dozens of species sat together as equals for the first time in galactic history. The rigid hierarchy that had defined the council was gone, replaced by a simple principle that the Ketrans had taught humanity: all thinking beings had value and deserved respect regardless of their appearance or abilities. General Park Byung-ho now commanded fleets that carried protection instead of conquest. Human bioships served as escorts for refugee convoys and mobile hospitals for species fleeing council oppression. The same technology that had won the Great Battle was now being used to save lives and build homes, and medical ships were miracles of biotechnology that could literally grow new organs and limbs for injured beings. Using Ketran knowledge enhanced by human engineering, they could heal damage that conventional medicine could never touch. Beings who had been crippled by council weapons were walking again. Commander Hun led the reconnaissance fleets that kept watch for council loyalist attacks. His ghost ships moved unseen through space, gathering intelligence and protecting vulnerable worlds from surprise assaults. The quantum cloaking technology had been improved even further, making his vessels truly invisible. Alliance was not just a military organization, but a true community where different species shared knowledge and culture. Human artists worked with alien musicians to create new forms of beauty, while scientists from a dozen worlds collaborated on projects that benefited everyone. Captain Lee Jun had become something of a legend among the Alliance forces. His biofighter had grown into a small ship over the year, and he used it to train new pilots from recently liberated worlds, teaching former slaves how to fight for their freedom. Was the most rewarding work he had ever done. The new pilots came from species that had never been allowed to have weapons under council rule. Now they flew ships that were alive and could adapt to their unique abilities. A pilot with 4 arms could control more weapons, while a species that saw in different spectrums could detect enemies. Others, Miss Dr. Lee Soo-jin, continued to develop new applications for Ketran biotechnology, working with scientists from across the Alliance. Each species brought their own